Hello, everybody. It is indeed an honor to make a presentation today on the 87th birthday of Dr. Hema, which is being celebrated as the World GNM Day. And I'm extremely grateful to Global GNM for giving me this opportunity to speak on this platform. So it's indeed a very, very empowering and wonderful gift that Dr. Hema has left us with. And when I was pondering about the speech, what came to my mind was my father's words. Whenever we fell ill, the first thing he would say is no medicines. Nature will take care of itself. Just leave it to nature. And this enraged my mother because she would see us, sometimes very, very ill. But then it was like, she would ask, what, do you want the children to die? But then we just healed and came out of it beautifully. And when I learned of Dr. Hema's theory, it was just an aha moment. And I came across it at a time after I went through a bout of depression. And this happened, it had occurred when I was a very young child, but I did not know it was depression. And it came back after a few years. And I have done many modalities in healing. I'm a therapist, but none of the therapies worked. I took help from my mentors, but it was sad to say that it just did not move. It was just there, and I didn't know what to do. My spiritual guru couldn't help me too. And I thought that the reason why I had it was because there was a death in the neighborhood of a very young child. And I thought that was the cause of my depression. But I really didn't know. I was really at the end of the tunnel, but there was no light at all. So then I decided to Google, and I Googled natural remedies for depression. And yes, there was breathing techniques, there was take this juice, take this food, and stuff like that. But then what came up for me was this small caption, mind-body connection. And below that was German New Medicine, but I did not touch German New Medicine because I saw the word medicine and I was not willing to take any medicine, no happy pills for me. So I went into researching on the mind-body connection. And it was pretty interesting because it was something I hadn't heard of. And the realization came that my depression was not because of the death of this boy. But what exactly happened was that when I went to the funeral and I was talking to the grandfather, offering my condolences, and I did not realize then that this grandfather was, he just resembled my perpetrator when I was a very young child. And I didn't realize that resemblance till I did my research, and it was such a, I should say this was another shock to me, because my trauma happened in my childhood, but what kept it alive was this trigger who was living in my environment. I was not aware of it. I did have symptoms which I did not realize was because of this trigger, which was activated each time I saw him or probably heard his voice in the corridor or something. But this was resolved once I learned GNM and I learned what tracks were, because the trauma is always over. And what keeps the trauma running for us is these tracks or triggers. So Dr. Hamer discovered that before every symptom which occurs, there is a conflict shock that has to happen. And this conflict shock or trauma, what is it? It is an incident which is very, very unexpected. If it's expected, it's not a shock to you, right? So it is very unexpected, where you do not have any coping mechanisms. You have no strategies. It leaves you feeling stranded or isolated. So once this is activated, now this conflict shock could be anything like a death, it could be an abuse, it could be a divorce, it could be an accident. But here, let me tell you that these are all huge traumas, which most certainly will resonate as a trauma to all of us or most of us. But there are traumas which could be traumatic to one person and it will not be a trauma for another person. It is all very subjective and depends on how we perceive it. Like, for example, for me, my teacher shouting at me or my boss raising his voice is a huge trauma. I don't like being shouted at. But to another person, he may just cough it off and probably think, what a fool I was to make a big hue and cry about it. But it is all in the perception of it. So just imagine that everything is fine, hunky-dory in the morning, and you're leaving for office, you're driving the usual regular way, and that path is very, very crowded with a lot of traffic, which is an everyday occurrence. And you have heard of accidents happening frequently on this road, but you have not encountered one. But that day, probably you go at that peak hour where traffic is very heavy and people just drive any which way and tempers are high. There's a lot of honking happening. And as you're driving, suddenly you see that some car has taken a turn where it shouldn't and it hits another car and there is a huge accident which occurs. And this is a big trauma for you. It's a big T trauma, as we call it. And then immediately what happens? Once this trauma occurs, a biological program starts in your body. At the psyche level, at the brain level, there will be concentric rings, which is known as the hematomas. And on the organ level, we will not find any changes. There will not be any symptoms when you are in the stress phase or when you are in the conflict active phase. As soon as a trauma occurs, you go into the stress phase or the conflict active phase. And here you do not feel any symptoms. The only thing which happens is that either cells may increase in a particular organ which is impacted by this trauma, or cells may decrease or an ulceration can take place in one of the organs. Only one of these could happen, a plus or a necrosis. And we are not aware of this. And this occurs based on the brain layer which is impacted. We have 4 brain layers. So based on which brain layer is affected, the cells will increase or the cells will decrease. Now, if the brain layer that is impacted is the brain stem, which is with the conflict theme of which is survival and indigestible morsel, something which you could not digest, then the cells increase. Similarly, if it is anything to do with cerebellum, which the conflict theme here is protection and feeling defiled. The third is cerebral medulla, which is to do with self-devaluation. And if a conflict lands here, then there will be a decrease in cells. And similarly, you have another called a layer called the cerebral cortex. And if the conflict lands here in one of the organs pertaining to the cerebral cortex, then there will be a reduction in cells. The brainstem cells, some of them are organs are some of them along the alimentary canal. Cerebellum is to do with the covering. It is the corium, the periosteum, which covers the bones, the pleura, which covers the lungs, the pericardium, which covers the heart. Then cortex could be the epidermis, which is the skin covering. And medulla is all the musculoskeletal system. So Now you have understood about what happens during the conflict active phase, but we are not aware of the cell plus or cell minus, nor are we aware which organ is affected. But what happens once a trauma occurs and you enter into the conflict active phase, you just think about it, that some trauma has happened. Then what do? You're constantly thinking about it. There is obsessive thinking. Your BP would be raised. Your hands and feet would be cold. There could be cold sweats. You will not eat well. You will not sleep well. But as a species, we are looking to resolve issues, right? I mean, we are not always in the same frame of mind. Like, just say you had a fight with a spouse or a neighbor. Now, it is not possible for us to be in that same angry mode always, okay? Like, we want some peace too. So we try to resolve by making up with the husband or calling it a truce with the neighbor and speaking to her. The same way, we were talking about you driving the car. So you saw the accident this morning and you start, that obsessive thinking. It's just on your mind. God, how do I go on that road again? It's always so crowded and there's something or the other happening. I'm scared. And then somewhere, you just resolve the issue by realizing, oh, there's another road. There's another route I can take. And this could be longer, but it is, relatively traffic free. So it's easier for me to go on that route. And what happens? You take that and you feel more calmer. So you have resolved the issue. So once you resolve that issue, the body goes into healing. And what happens here? Here there are certain symptoms, like not symptoms, but you start relaxing. Your body gets warmer, your extremity gets warmer, you sleep well, you eat well, and then your BP will come back to normal. And here what happens is that there are certain symptoms like pain, inflammation, fever, which occurs. And this is actually the body healing. And inflammation occurs because water goes to that particular organ to aid it in healing. And we think that having pain or having fever, we are falling ill, we have a symptom. But it is not falling ill, but it is only showing us that we have recovered from the trauma, which is so very empowering. Now here, once you've reached once healing has happened, microbes come into play. And for example, you have the fungi and the tuberculosis bacteria. Now, I told you about the endodermal tissue where there is a cell plus. Now, what happens during the trauma? There is a cell addition, right? Cells increase. Now, when there is a resolution, when you resolve the issue, those extra cells have to be removed because the body has to come back to normal. Immediately, as soon as there is a resolution, the body is mobilized to restore the organ to normalcy. So the extra cells will be plowed out. When there is a cell reduction, more cells will be added. So now when the extra cells are being removed, they have to go out of the body, right? So what helps us? It is these microbes which help us to remove these extra cells. But in case there has been some vaccination or you have been taking some antibiotics, then it is not possible for there might not be any microbes, there might not be those tuberculosis bacteria, when these cells will remain encapsulated and they are very, very harmless. Now, I was talking to you about tracks or triggers, right? So the main event, that is the DHS, is over. And for all of us, what keeps it alive are these tracks. So as I told you, just let's go back to the same example. You're driving in the morning. This is the first route you took, which is very, very crowded. Traffic is haphazard. People move any which way, take a turning any which way, scooters and cyclists. So then just imagine that that accident happened, okay? Now, it is not only that accident. Now just think about this. You are looking at me talking, right? Now you're not only looking at me, but your brain is also registering the color of my glasses, the color of my lipstick, the color of my shirt, the chair, the way I speak, the way I shake my head, my hair, what's in my background, right? And at the same time, it is also registering what's happening in your background. Okay, like when you're listening to it, are there any other noises? Are there any other sounds, any other smells, any other tastes? And probably you're looking at others also. If it is a Zoom call, you'll be aware of the others present, what they are wearing, so on and so forth. So much is going into the brain. So just in that same way, when there is an accident, at the time of the accident, your brain is registering all that is happening there. It could be the number plate, the number. Sometimes you don't know why a particular number or why a particular color, the color of the car or the logo on the car, or if there is anything else stuck. Some people do stick something on the car. So maybe that could be a trigger. Or probably the driver is coming out and the way he steps out, his shoes or his shirt color, the expression on his face, maybe the way he raised his eyebrows could be a trigger. At the same time, you roll down your glass, window glass, so you can hear the voices. So whatever somebody else is saying, like I once had a client who was also involved in some kind of an accident, and her track was the word wow, and it was like, how can, this was a thought, how can wow be a track for me? I mean, like, it's an accident. But then when she went back into that time, what happened was that there were youngsters who had come in to, watch or help, and they just came in, and it wasn't a, wow, it's beautiful, but whoa, what an accident. And this registered, and that word became a track. So whatever sounds you hear, whatever smells you hear, all those become tracks and keep it alive for you. And that's where each time that track comes in, your symptoms start aggravating. So paying attention to what you saw, what you heard, or what you were thinking when the symptom aggravates will lead you to a track and becomes very easy to resolve it. So now I'm going to present you with a few case studies. The first is that of a young lady who came to me with knee pain. And knee pain, of course, is, as you know, belongs to the musculoskeletal system. So the brain layer is the cerebral medulla. The conflict theme, of course, is a self-evaluation issue. So here, what happened was she came to see me with a pain in her right knee. Before progressing with the case study, let me tell you the importance of knowing the laterality. Laterality is whether you are right-wired or left-wired. Here we are not bothered whether you are right-handed or left-handed. That is different. But we need to check the laterality, because once you check the laterality, it helps you understand. Supposing she has a right knee, you know who was associated with the conflict, right? And if it is left, it has another connotation altogether. So the way you do it is that you tell the person to clap their hands, and whichever hand comes on top, if it's the right hand which comes on top, then we say that they are right-wired. Immaterial of the fact whether they are right-handed, they write with the right hand or the left hand, does not matter. If the hand on top is right, then they are right-wired. So when a conflict comes with, on the right-hand side, like she had a right knee pain, then this is something to do with a partner. And if it is on the left-hand side, it is something to do with the mother or the child. And reverse if she is left-wired. So this client came to me with a right knee pain. So when we went into therapy or on questioning, I came to understand that she was an athlete and was training intensely to qualify for the upcoming competition. And her parents also, I mean, she was the only child and they were very aware of her passion for this. And they wanted to, extend all support. So they had sold off a small piece of land they had to support her, to bring her up. So they registered her at the best institute, and she was with a very, very good coach, very famous and very well known. So everything was hunky dory. Her training was happening very well. Then all of a sudden, there was another girl who joined. And this girl was very, very affluent. And my client slowly, I mean, she started seeing a change in the attitude of the coach. Now, this girl would just go, my client would just go and finish with her session, her training, and come back. Whereas this girl would get the coach, the new girl who had come would get the coach gifts, would get him drinks, then she would pick him up and drop him. So that, everything shifted in the favor of the new girl. The client saw a change in the attitude of the coach, and he started being very, very insulting towards the client. And this new girl was not on par with my client in her running capabilities. So, according to my client, he would make my client run bare feet on very rough terrain. And naturally, her speed would get curtailed. And this girl would win. And then he would say, look at this girl. She is so good, and you are not. So, this girl was saying it was too much for me. Like I had to hold myself in place. I literally wanted to kick him. I hated him, but they could do nothing about it. But when the finals came, it was this girl who won, and the new girl who came did not make it within the top three, which is a huge resolution to my client. And then her knee pain started. So when she came to me, she said that winning the race was a huge resolution. But knowing that I am in the healing phase is a greater resolution. I thought I had a disease and I had a symptom and may have to give up my running altogether. But this knowledge has empowered me so much. And I realized that what anyone says does not matter because I have the capability in me. And I realized that there could be detractors, but my focus is somewhere else. And the knee pain went away. Next is a client who came to see me with TMJ problem, and it was pretty intense. She had intense pain, and she thought it was because of the wisdom tooth which she was sprouting. But the pain was pretty intense, so she thought she could have her wisdom tooth removed. But the doctor told her that it wasn't the wisdom tooth, it was growing well, and there was enough space in her mouth to accommodate the new tooth. But it was that she was suffering from TMJ, and he gave her a mouth guard, but she felt it was horribly painful. So she did not use it. And when we worked together, what came up was that she had just joined college, and joined as in she had paid up her fees, and in a few days the college was going to reopen, and she was very happy because she had got the college of her choice and she had got the course. I mean, it was very difficult to procure a seat, but she did so on merit with no payment whatsoever. So she was very, very happy. And to top it all, she read in the newspapers that ragging was banned. So, I mean, like, this was something which was worrying her, but she was very, very happy. So, the day of the college, I mean, the day she has to join college dawned, and then she goes to college and she goes by her car. And as she enters the college and goes into the driveway, she sees the car driveway is full of seniors and there were some juniors. And she said she was horrified to see the seniors make the juniors remove a few, unbutton themselves and make them walk on the main road outside the college gates, which she found was very, very horrifying. So she decided, I mean, she initially thought she would get off at the entrance, but then she told her driver to drive her up till the portico. And she thought very quietly she'd just slip into the auditorium where the freshman orientation was going to happen. So after that, she thought it would be easier because things would settle down by then. But to her dismay, she gets off at the portico only to be bundled off by some seniors who were there, knowing that this was bound to happen. So she was taken to the entrance of the college, and yeah, that was the task given to her, where she had to unbutton her shirt and walk on the main road. She refused, and there was an exchange of words when one of them just threw her against the compound wall, very near the exit gate. And it got very violent where, she was beaten. And then from outside, there was a cab driver who had parked his cab, and he just came, took hold of this girl, that's my client's hand, and said, your mom had sent me. She said that college gets over in half an hour, so I've come to collect you. And he just bundled her and dropped her off at home, which was a resolution for her. But she said it was not a complete one because, she had to come back to the college, and she was very, very fearful of facing them again. So then the next day, there was very, very strict law enforced that there could not be any ragging because of the complaints from the freshies' parents. So it sort of settled for her, but she was very, very uncomfortable when she met these girls. So her father, with great difficulty, got her transferred to another college which offered the same course and the same combination, which left her very, very happy. And this was a huge resolution for her when the TMJ started. And she told me that she felt like her dog. Each time there was a stranger coming, he would bark and they would hold him. They would leash him at that point of time and hold him by the leash. And, it was like, I'm not allowed to bite. I'm not allowed to snap. And that is where her jaw got affected. So realizing that she was in the healing phase, and the fact that there are so many options, it's, you look at your options and make the shift, transformed her, and her pain left her immediately. The next case is that of a client who had come to see me for acne. And she had been to dermatologists, she had been to natural therapy, she used a lot of lotions, potions, nothing seemed to work. And she went natural, she tried to detoxify, she went to a place where there was total, a detox center, but that didn't help her. But she said that one thing she did was she stayed off fried food and sweets, which she loved. For 6 months, she was totally out of it. But then nothing happened. Her acne remained. So she decided that, why give up the vices when it's not helping me heal? So she's come back to eating all of fried food and sweets, which she said could be a cause of the acne. Now here, it is the corium skin which gets affected, which belongs to cerebellum. And the conflict theme here is an attack conflict of feeling defiled. So this was a very young girl, and she was studying in the 12th standard. And in India, after your 12th standard, you graduate and go to college. So these were the last few days of college where, they wrap up for a few days, which is study leave, and then they have the exams, and then they are done with it. So since it was the last few days, the college teachers decided to give them a farewell. So they told them, give them a theme, and that was the traditional sari, which had to be worn for that farewell party. So this girl was, naturally all of them, including this girl, were very, very excited about the sari they were going to wear for the first time. So she went and got herself a lovely sari and had her face and her hair done, and she felt very, very good. She told me that I've never felt good this way, and this was the first time my parents allowed me to do what I wanted, because this was the last get together we had as friends in school. So she goes to school and she sees all her friends standing in a group talking. So she goes and joins them. And there were a couple of them who were pointedly passing remarks at the others who were in a sari. So it was, you are so beautiful to one, your hair looks so good to the other, you got a very good figure to a third one, and so on and so forth. So this client of mine is waiting, thinking, okay, even I'm going to get a good remark. But she was shocked. They looked at her when it was her turn and said, oh my God, what an ugly face. Your face needs some treatment. And she was shocked to hear it, because she knew she looked good and she didn't know why she had such a comment passed on her. So, I mean, that kept on and on, she didn't enjoy the party, because even though heart of hearts, in the beginning, she knew that she looked good. These comments, she told me, made her to rethink, do I really look good or am I ugly? And then she went back home, and a few days later, she sees acne on her skin. And did she stop with it? No, she didn't. She kept looking into the mirror and she said, oh, at least that day I look good, but today it's worse. I have this acne, I have it here, I have it here. And then it kept multiplying. So once we realized that this is the conflict which has led her to have acne, and I explained the whole process to her, and she really understood that, I mean, it is time for her to stop beating herself up and understand that she is also as beautiful as the others, in fact, more. Then there was a total resolution. There was no use of any lotion or potion. She did not use anything, but her skin became so beautiful. Next is a client who came to see me with eczema. And this is to do with the cerebral cortex, the ectoderm, and the conflict theme here is a separation conflict. So this was a young boy who had come, and he had the eczema on his chest. His chest was red, it was inflamed, it was very, very itchy. And they had taken him to a number of doctors, but nothing worked. He was a very young child, so the dermatologist they went to said that he would not give him steroids, and he had prescribed some very mild ointments, but that didn't work. And the parents told me that prior to this, the skin was very dry, very, very dry. And in fact, the mother said it was scaly and it was gray in color. So they used to apply olive oil and gels, and she said probably it was the over lubrication applying all this which has led to the skin becoming red and inflamed. But I explained the process to her, and I mean explained the conflict active phase and the entire stuff. And when we worked on the boy, and the parents also had to give in resources, because the boy was, he was just, the important points were what we gathered, and what came up was that this boy was very, very attached to his paternal grandfather who was living with them. And every evening, the grandfather used to take him to the beach, was very, very close to their house, and there was a reclining chair. So he would sit on the reclining chair, and this child would, lay on the grandfather's chest. That is, his chest was in contact with the grandfather's chest. And that day, the normal event happened, and the child was playing with the key, which was inside the grandfather's pocket, the house key. And he, being a child, didn't realize it, but didn't know what, he should do it. So he just took the key and flung it into the sea without knowing, obviously. But the grandfather did not think, but he just put the child down on the ground and ran towards the sea. And it was very slushy at the seabed. So he just slipped, went in, never to come back. So this was a huge conflict for the entire family, including this boy who was very, very attached to the grandfather. Now, resolution came to this child in the form of the maternal grandfather, who anyway was going to come down to India. So, and he came down to India, and the initial hug, it was again like carrying the child this way, and it was, he would call them granddad. So he used that same terminology, and that hug, probably that conflict, set the resolution alive. And there was that itching, the skin became red hot, there was inflammation. And then I asked the parents to keep track of what the tracks were. So they found out they had not gone to the beach after that incident, but now they took him to the beach with the grandfather, the maternal grandfather, and they found that the symptoms flared up. And also very interesting, but this took some time for them to realize that each time that blue shirt was worn by the grandfather, the itching started. So I gave them certain tips on how to, the practical solutions for them to follow so that they could resolve the issue. And eczema became a thing of the past for this child. Next is the case of a client who came to me with insomnia. And this lady did not, I must say, she did not understand when I explained the process to her. I mean, she did not really understand what was conflict active and what was a resolution. So I decided to go ahead and tell her about, I just asked her what was stressing her in her life. And immediately she came out with the issue that there was a lot of stress in her life, and that was to do with her daughter. She couldn't sleep well. And upon asking what the issue was, this was a very, very conventional Indian family, and the daughter was of marriageable age. So the parents, this was the only child, and they decided to look around, search for a groom for this girl. And they did find a very good proposal. And when they came upon the proposal, they took it to the daughter. And the daughter was totally unaware of this proposal. And it came as a shock to her. And she decided to tell them the truth that she was in a relationship which they had not known till that point of time. And it was a huge shock to the parents. But the girl refused to see reason. She said that, her mind was very set and this was what she was going to go through with. And the parents did not like it one bit because it was the family honor at stake, right? According to them, all the other nieces and nephews were well settled. Parents had found a good groom, a good match, a good family. And it would be a shame for them if this happened and everybody was to know that the boy was chosen by the bride. So then I sat down and I asked them, they were very, very community centric. The boy had to be from my own community. He had to be a double postgraduate and he had to have a good income. So when I sat and discussed it, it was very surprising. The boy was from the same community. He was a postgraduate, not a double postgraduate, but he was earning a very handsome income. So on reasoning and helping them understand that this was the best they could get, and there was nothing that the boy was lacking. and helping them see reason brought a huge shift because the boy was from the same community. So what more would they want? And the girl knew the boy, so it was an added bonus. So realizing all of this brought a huge shift. And she told me that the stress just vanished. She was able to accept this boy and they were happily married. Another is the case of a girl who had lactose intolerance. And she had each time, she had something to, food which had milk or milk products, which was mostly cottage cheese, according to her, then there would be diarrhea and there would be cramping. And this is again to do with an indigestible morsel. It's the brain stem which is involved. And there is some chunk, the chunk could be, a relationship, or it could be a divorce, or it could be an accident, whatever. The chunk is something which is indigestible, which brings about an anger in her. So she told me that she was transferred to a city where, milk and milk products, this is what the city was famous for. And, almost every food had something of milk in it. And even though she would carry her food to her workplace, most of the days there was a conference or she was in a meeting with a client. And she said it looked very bad to, for me to take my food when food was ordered by the company. So it looked very, very embarrassing when I took out my food and ate. And I was forced to eat the outside food, which left me with my symptoms. So it came to light that, when she was young and she was having breakfast at the dining table, it was again something to do with milk and cottage cheese. She was eating it, and there was a huge spat between her parents. And her father took out the knife and went charging towards the mother. And this child was shocked. It was a big shock to the child, and the trap was the milk and the milk product. So once she realized this, and she also realized the problem was not with the milk or the milk product. They were good for her health. They would not do anything to harm her. Then the whole issue shifted and it resolved by itself. Another case is that of a client who came to me with plantar fasciitis. And his heel would hurt horribly, especially when he got up in the morning. His wife had to, warm water and bring it so that he could soak it for some time and then put his foot down. He had some special slippers, but that did not work. So what came to light was that he had a peculiar gait. And in addition to it, he had flat feet. So he had joined a gym for the first time and he was on the treadmill. And he just looked into the mirror and he saw the whole lot of trainers behind him, standing behind him. It was pretty empty at that point of time. The gym was pretty empty. And he saw quite almost the entire trainer lot standing behind him, looking pointedly at his feet and making fun, which shocked him and made him feel very, very embarrassed. He felt, like it is something wrong with me. And that was it. That was the last day. I mean, the first and the last day. He did not go back to the gym. But resolution happened when his neighbor took it upon himself to help this boy out of the problem and, took him along with him to join a marathon group. And, slowly they started encouraging him, and he started 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers, and then went on to 10 kilometers, 20 kilometers, went back to the gym, which was a huge resolution, and the pain started. So just understanding this, that he was in the healing, plus, this is what it is. Just accept. You cannot change people, but you can change your environment. And that brought about a huge shift in him. So these are a few case studies I have shared with you all, and I hope that this would help you all get an understanding of what how well this system, that is German New Medicine, works, and wishing you all a happy journey, and happy journey with German New Medicine, helping yourselves, your family, and others. Thank you.